And yes, we're off. Howdy, everybody. Welcome to this edition of Move to Amend's monthly live stream, the Move to Amend Report. This is the space where you can learn about what's going down in the movement to amend the U.S. Constitution and legalize democracy. I'm your host, Laura Bonham, Move to Amend National Board member, and I'm here with Caitlin Saposi-Belknap, our National Director. And as we said in the warm-up, we really encourage your participation as we go along. So if you have any questions for the national team, make a comment during the live stream, and we'll answer your question in real time.
And we also always welcome any suggestions you have for improvement, so please let us know how these live streams are working for you. And right now, you can post your comments where you're tuning in from if you haven't told us already. We'd love to hear that. Please say hi. Garrett, it looks like Keon's helping too, but Garrett's working the comments, so he'll be posting links and follow-up details about the projects and the events that we reference, so you can easily go find them. And let us know that you're here by posting a comment to tell us where you're tuning in from and if you're active with Move to Amend yet in your community. So we wanted to talk a little bit about, we'll definitely give the updates from Move to Amend for August and what's ahead in September the way that we always do. But we wanted to talk a little bit about what happened this month with the really horrific events that happened in Charlottesville, and then the whole subsequent discussion that we're having as a country, which is a discussion that we actually really need to have, but it's being done in a pretty unfortunate way in a lot of circles. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit. So do you want to start us off, Laura?
I do, and before we jump in to talk about Charlottesville, I think it's worth mentioning that Dick Gregory died just a couple days ago on August 19th. And for those who don't know, Gregory rose to fame in the 1960s and is credited as being among the first black comedians to cross that white line. His shtick worked as well with white audiences as it did with black ones. In the course of his life, he was jailed, beaten, and shot because of his civil rights activism, which eventually resulted in electoral activism for Gregory. He ran as a Democrat for the mayor of Chicago against Richard Daley. He went on to run for president the same year that Hubert Humphrey was nominated by the Democratic Party. That was 68, I think. Gregory continued his campaign that year as the write-in candidate for the Freedom and Peace Party, but Eldridge Cleaver held their official nomination, and Gregory received only 47,000 votes. But despite those losses, Gregory will always be remembered for his devastating wit and the doors he opened for other great black comedians of the time, like Nipsey Russell, Moms Mabley, and Red Fox. His influence is heard in the humor of Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, and Chris Rock. Rest in peace, Dick Gregory. But it is a horrible twist of fate that just 1 week earlier, Charlottesville became the target for the now emboldened alt-right, KKK, Nazis, and white nationalists determined to exalt slavery and Jim Crow by preserving Confederate monuments where they stand. I was horrified. I mean, I'm still horrified to see those images of Americans marching in step, carrying torches through the dark, and chanting. It just sent shivers down my spine. I was literally dumbstruck. I'm still having a hard time believing that this nation has sunk this low since the civil rights and feminist movements in the 60s that were, the fodder, the background to my childhood. How are you, Caitlin? What's your perspective on it?
Well, we wanted to talk about obviously I am really upset and horrified also. But I also think that, this isn't actually some kind of brand new thing. There's been a current of fascism in this country all along. With Trump's presidency, there's an emboldening for sure on the part of, white supremacists. But I also think that it's important that we're having this conversation as a country. And we also wanted to talk about it here because a lot of times people get kind of confused about why Move to Amend repeatedly and always brings up issues of race and oppression and feels as though those need to be part of our conversation. So we wanted to take that on and to explain ourselves again. We did issue a statement on Monday about what had happened in Charlottesville to help explain that, from our perspective, we're working on building a democracy movement, and we cannot talk about democracy, which means the people rule, without talking about the fact that our culture is rooted in racism, misogyny, homophobia. There's institutional and cultural oppression in many aspects still that excludes large numbers of human beings and denies them their fundamental human rights. And so while, white people might feel as though it's easier to just sort of put all that stuff aside and focus on money and politics or corporate power, that's really missing all the linkages and how we got into the situation that we're in. It's really not an accident that we're now in a situation where property, which is what corporations are, has more human rights than humans, when we are a country that was founded on stealing property from the people who lived here and stealing human beings from Africa and turning them into property, and then creating a legal system that was based on protecting that private land property and protecting the human being property. And that is, the founding story of the United States. And anything that has been done to move us in a different direction from that has been done by people's movements who actually understood that oppression is a human rights issue, and that's the tradition that Move to Amend is in. And so all these things are tied up and all connected. And that's what I've been thinking about, how to help better explain that, how to be more clear, how to also make sure that the conversation around white supremacy doesn't just turn into a misunderstanding and an assumption that we're talking about just the KKK or Nazis or something like that when we're talking about white supremacy. White supremacy is a system of privileges and protections for one race over other races, white race over other races. And so, we have white supremacy in this country, even when Nazis are not marching in the streets. That's just kind of the most extreme, visible example. But white supremacy is the fact that black and brown people are killed by police more than white people, and are in jail more than white people, and are not able to access, housing and other benefits like good jobs and college and things like that. All of that is all white supremacy too. So that's what I've been thinking about, and also the First Amendment and how the First Amendment is being used to shield hate speech in ways that, are actually unconstitutional. But because we have racism in this country embedded into our legal system, people are looking the other way and using the First Amendment to defend, calling for people saying that people should be murdered and killed when that is not actually what the First Amendment is supposed to be protecting. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts, and I want to pop over here and make sure there's nothing, want to welcome people to join the conversation if you have questions or comments as well. And so what about you, Laura? Thanks for bringing up Gregory, and what else do we want to make sure to say here?
I think one of the things that came out of this was that, I have to, thank heavens that our president is as inarticulate as he is, because his response to the whole thing kind of gave a pass to some of the elements that were in the counter-protests that were not exactly practicing King's principles of nonviolence. So I think that we on the left need to understand exactly what those principles of nonviolence are, and they do include self-defense, but it's not an aggressive type of violence, and that it's kind of like it got away with it, but it gave Trump an opening. It gave people an opening. Well, people on the left were doing it too. So we're building a democracy movement, and we're trying to build a nonviolent one, and that's marching in the footsteps of King and Gandhi and folks before us. So we don't want to lose the high ground. We don't want to get off our message, and that's exactly what happens if it turns into a skirmish. So I think that's part of that we need to look at. It kind of, got lost in the shuffle because Trump's comments, but apparently there was violence on both sides, and that kind of was disheartening to hear.
Well, I think we also, though, need to be more clear when we're talking about what is violence. There's violence against people, and then there's property destruction, and those oftentimes get equated, but they're not the same thing at all. So as we go forward in this very divided country that we have, and people's, I don't, until we actually solve this problem around white supremacy and oppression for real, I think we'll continue to have moments of violence. And again, some people, Black and brown people, are facing violence every day, all the time, trying to survive living in a country that doesn't support their rights the same way that it supports white people's rights. And so that's also, violent all the time. And so I just think that anytime there is any sort of violence or property destruction, that the conversation needs to stay at, a big picture level too. And certainly that's not where corporate media takes it. And that's unfortunate. So it's important that we continue to keep the frame and the context clear, because, there certainly is, people are very frustrated, and there's, real material reasons why there's a legitimate frustration, and it's being blamed on different folks, and a lot of whom are not responsible. Immigrants are not who's responsible for the economic situation in, capitalism right now. But there's a big, target saying this is who you should blame and be, holding responsible for the fact that you don't have a job or don't have a good paying job, and things like that. And so it's just really important that all of us continue to keep that context as close to the conversation as we can, since corporate media, doesn't do that, and really does a disservice by focusing in on, moments, skirmishes and things like that, which are not really the full story. And the other thing too is that, and we can kind of come back to this, but it's important that, again, as we're working on this human rights issue, making sure that it's clear that human beings actually have more rights than our legal creations, corporations, that we be telling kind of the full story of how we would get to this point, and also that we would be working with the folks who are most impacted by corporate rule, which is marginalized communities. It's low-income people, it's people of color, it's women, it's immigrants. And so in order to effectively do that in a country that is so clearly divided and conquered around race, we actually need to bolster our own skills and our capacity to work across difference. And the principles and tools and skills that help us to do that can also be used to work more effectively with people who might hold different values than us in some respects, and working with conservatives potentially. But Move to Amend has always been really clear that if you look at the way that social change has happened in this country, the people who have driven it are the people who are most impacted by the wrongs. And so that is who's going to get this done this time too. That's just always how it is. Who has the incentive to actually do the work to build a movement for power? It's people who are disempowered. And so We have to prioritize making sure that our movements to, fight against wrongs like, people being disproportionately locked up in prison in this country because private prisons have a profit motive. There's a corporate rule connection there. And people might be coming to it in different ways, more like the immediate issues that are affecting families when you have, friends and family who are actually locked up. But we can make those connections and show how movement against private prisons is really the same movement for democracy that we're working for. And but in order to be able to effectively have those conversations, we actually have to build our schools, our skills and our capacity to work across race, because we don't really trust each other. Even if we think we do, like in theory, the ways that we go to different schools, we go to different restaurants, we live in different neighborhoods, and this is a really segregated country. And, so that means that we don't actually have relationships across race a lot of the time. And so we have to be intentional to build them. And once we do, it makes it really easy to see how racist this country is. That's been my experience. As a white person, you don't necessarily realize. But then once you, have friends who are black and brown folks, and you hear about what it is that happens to them when they're just trying to drive down the street or, take their kids to the library or whatever, and the ways that they're treated, it becomes really hard to overlook the racism that happens all the time.
Yeah, there's more than one America. I just want to make clear on what I was saying before about violence. It's like, and I was talking about violence against people. I should have said that, but one of the things that shocked me about that whole thing is that people came armed. I mean, they really came armed to that thing, and it was 99.9% of the people, of the alt-right that were armed to the teeth with guns and knives and oil lamps and torches, and it's like, and claiming that they're peacefully protesting, right on about that First Amendment stuff you were talking about before. So it's like, that isn't peaceful. If you come there with that kind of intent, that's not peaceful protesting. It's not something the left should say, oh, we have a pass to do this now. That's what I was talking about. It's like, no. There's self-defense. Self-defense is okay. But harming other people with the intent of going to harm other people, that is not acceptable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it doesn't help. It doesn't help build our movement, and that's it's unstrategic. Regardless about making a moral judgment on it, it's unstrategic. So we do have a couple questions. So the first one, or comments. So Ken says racism and other issues are important, but they are not at the center of the issues Move to Amend is supposed to address. And so I would say, yes and no, right? The issue that we're addressing is that corporations have more rights than people, and that money is, more powerful than human interests in our politics, right? And I would say that white supremacy is layered on top of those things, and means that if you're a person of color, the fact that corporations have more rights than you actually affects your life even more significantly than if you are a white person. Same thing with money in politics. So that's part of why it's important that we not just gloss over that. And also, just having something as significant as what happened in Charlottesville happen this month, I think every single organization, every single workplace, every single school, every single family actually needs to be talking about what it means that we actually have a country where Nazis and Ku Klux Klan members think that they can actually walk out on the streets in large numbers and feel comfortable calling for the murder or deportation of people of color. That's something that is so significant and so important that pretty much everything needs to be kind of put on pause for a second to address what the heck is going on, that's actually something that people feel okay doing. And and that we have a country where they would actually legally have a right to do that. I mean, I personally just really agree with the way that Germany handled their horror after the Second World War, and really made an intentional effort to dismantle any proudness around Nazism, and and destroyed anything that would potentially be used later, or put it in a proper context, like a museum, to take responsibility, but instead, but not allow it to be something that anybody could use later to justify anything so horrible as that. And really, slavery and the genocide of Native Americans, which is racism from this country, is on par with the Holocaust. And so we have some grappling to do as a country with the fact that we never actually took care of that. And so many of these Confederate monuments were actually put up not during the Civil War or when the South was a Confederacy. It's not historical. It was in reaction to the Civil Rights Movement. It was an attempt of the Ku Klux Klan to beat back the Civil Rights Movement, which is, that's not, I mean, it's historical because it happened in the 60s, but the whole argument that it is, some sort of legacy left over from the Civil War is kind of just completely not true. It was people who didn't want the Civil Rights Movement to be successful. And I just don't see any good reason why we would at all make a place for that.
That's absolutely true. They're monuments to slavery and Jim Crow. They're not monuments to the war. And you know what? They lost the war. The war's over. They lost.
Right. Just like Germany lost the war. And so you put all that stuff to bed and you say, we were wrong. And actually there's nothing honorable about this. And we're sorry. And we will actually make sure that nobody else ever feels as though there's any place for this in our society. That is the proper way to deal with something so horrific as generations of slavery and genocide. So I think that that's why we wanted to take the beginning part of the report this month to talk about this, because we should not carry on as if everything is normal when this is what's happening in our country. That's Move to Men's perspective, at least. So we all need to pause and figure out how this does affect our work and what it means for our work, that this is the political context that we're in right now.
Well, part of it is, from my perspective, is we have an obligation to use whoever we are and whatever privilege we possess, that we have an obligation to use that to protect those on the front lines of oppression. And that's what's been going on in the streets. But at the same time, we also have to end the systems within our institutions that nurture and prolong it, what you were talking about before. So protesting and counter-protesting is the counter-protesting to Nazism is necessary, and protesting for democracy and is necessary. It's not enough unless there's real organizing behind it. And that is basically why Move to Amend is here, is to help connect all these dots that are operating on so many levels and build a movement so we can pass the We the People Amendment and then go on to build democracy, real democracy. So what happened in August, Caitlin?
Okay, yeah, we'll move on. I just...
Did get Gregory dying.
Well, I did want to say one other, just to underscore, when you say organizing, I think it's important that we make clear that what we mean by that is building power. And so sometimes we say organizing, and for people who don't have experience organizing, that might not be clear what that means. And so it's building power. And so that's what we're always trying to do. And building power with communities of color means acknowledging that white supremacy is a real thing, and that it actually affects all white people and all people, and so that means that we need to figure out how it is affecting us and work on dismantling it in our organizations and as individuals, because it's getting in the way of our ability to work across broad swaths of folks, which is who we're going to need to get this amendment passed and beyond. So in August, and actually kind of in that same vein, the first week of August, we were all in Minnesota at the 3rd Democracy Convention, and it was an awesome event of about 500 people coming together across all aspects of the democracy movement in the United States. And we've put up the materials from our sessions of the Democratizing the Constitution conference, which is the role that what Move to Amend brought to the table at the Democracy Convention. And so folks who are not able to attend with us can still use the materials and the resources and see what all was talked about. And our speakers, we asked them to send us their materials and all that. So we're still kind of putting up a few things, but a lot of it is already there, and Garrett will post the link to the page on our website where you can see that. And you can also go to the Democracy Convention website and see, everything that was offered. So that took a lot of August, actually, because it was like a week. It was 5 days, but then we were there for a week, and then, kind of all the follow-up. So that was like basically the first half of the month was Democracy Convention. And then
it does seem like a long time ago, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Like
it does. Well, it was sort of so much work going into it, and then it was like done. So yeah, that is behind us now, and we're working out the details about when we will have another one. It's looking like it might be in Los Angeles area, and maybe next year, but maybe the year after. That's all still getting worked out. So more details will be coming as soon as we figure those out. It's a coalition effort with many other organizations, so we work together to figure out when we'll be doing them and how. So that was the first half of the month, more or less. And then other than that, we've been busy working on We the People Lobby Month. So We the People Lobby Month is August, and the reason why that's We the People Lobby Month is because in August, our Congress members and senators take the month off for recess from the beginning of August to Labor Day in order to go home, and they probably take some vacation time, but they also are available for town meetings and visits from constituents. And so we really try to focus in while they're at home to set up meetings with constituents to ask them to support the We the People amendment. So we have a goal this year to get our amendment introduced in the Senate. It is already introduced in the House. It's House Joint Resolution 48, and we have 44 co-sponsors. And our goal in 2017 was to get to 35, so we're almost actually met our goal for 2018, but we'll keep going. And so we've been helping folks set up their meetings, and a lot of them are still happening, but I did want to give a shout out to some of the folks who already had meetings. Our affiliates in Ohio have already met with Senator Sherrod Brown and Senator Rob Portman's offices, and also Representative David Joyce. So way to go, folks in Ohio, for your good work there. A shout out to our Minnesota affiliates for meeting with Senator Franken's office, and I know they're meeting with our other senator at the beginning of September. And our Santa Clara County, California affiliate met with Representative Zoe Lofgren in the House, and I hear she showed them pictures of her grandchildren at the beginning of the meeting. And some folks in Massachusetts have been setting up meetings, and I think got one commitment. I'm not remembering the representative right now, but again, that's another House member. Folks in Washington have been organizing meetings as well, and I know there's a lot of you out there who are still working on landing meetings. So if anybody out there has another meeting that you've already done that you want to tell us about in the comments, feel free, or if you're working on setting one up. Garrett will also share the link because it's not too late to join the We the People Lobby Month. They'll be home through Labor Day. And also, if you can't get a meeting with your actual representative between now and then it's still very worth it to meet with their staff, and and you just want to ask kind of who the best person is to meet with, who handles issues of, it might be money in politics, it might be corporate power, it might be just kind of government workings, but you can ask, and then you can still set up that meeting even if it's past the September, Labor Day cutoff. And all the details for everything you would need to do those meetings and to let us know that you want to get started, and then what you would take with you and how you would go about setting up the meeting, all of that is on our website. So Garrett will post the link, and would really encourage everybody to join in to We the People Lobby Month. Before I go on to some other affiliate shout-outs, Laura, do you have anything to add about any of that?
I do. I want to, you mentioned Washington State, and I want to bring up California State. Those were both states that recently passed ballot initiative that supported our language. And in California, this year at their state convention, they had a floor vote where the California Democratic Party passed the same language as our resolution. So I'm just trying to give some encouragement to folks in California to really meet with your elected officials, because it's more than just the signatures on our petition. You've actually had real action happening in your state, and it's being a Democratic state. You got the Democratic Party behind you now, so you got some real muscle there to negotiate with and meeting with your members of Congress and your senators.
Yeah, and obviously here in California, I'm in Sacramento, so as a Californian, I'm aware of how many representatives we have in the House of Representatives here in the state, and so there's really, at this point now, with our state passing a ballot initiative, and then certainly if they're a Democrat and their party, putting into the platform that they support the We the People amendment, that there's no excuse for any Democratic Congress member not to be a co-sponsor. And then all the Republican Congress members, we still voted as a state, regardless of party, to support the We the People amendment. So either way, actually. So yes, thanks for underscoring that one. And we have a lot that we could bring to the table here in California. So if you live in California and your representative is not on board, then let's make it happen so that we can actually do our part and deliver the goods. Let's see.
I wasn't insinuating that you're not doing anything, Caitlin.
Well, but we could be doing more, right? That's why we did all the work to get that ballot measure on the ballot and passed. Right. And so, right. Now we need to hold our representatives accountable to follow through. We could always be linkages. Doing more. And let's see. So I did want to give a shout out to some other affiliates who got good stuff done this month. In particular, want to welcome actually Cincinnati, Ohio, and I know they've been playing a big role in the meetings with senators in Ohio. And Cincinnati, Ohio, is our newest affiliate. So welcome officially, Cincinnati. They've been a working group for that. What?
I said, welcome, Cincinnati.
Yes,
it's
welcome,
WMTA, Cincinnati. That's for old people will get that joke.
Yeah, we should make you sing a song about every new affiliate that comes on that would appeal to older people. So yeah, welcome, Cincinnati, folks. And then also want to thank again our affiliates in Minnesota for their awesome hosting in Minneapolis of the Democracy Convention. Not just the Twin Cities affiliates, but all of our Minnesota affiliates did a lot of work on the ground. And so thank you and good work. And it was great to see all of you in person, which we don't get to do that often. And then Metro Denver Move to Amend joined with a number of other organizations to rally on the Colorado State Capitol steps and march to the ALEC Western Conservative Summit conferences. ALEC and the Western Conservative Summit were in Denver to rally their supporters, and ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council. It is a corporate organization set out to change the rules that states operate by to favor corporate power in basically like every aspect of society, and to write legislation that benefits corporations and the profits of corporations. And so our Denver folks showed up to protest that agenda, and Education Secretary Betsy DeVos was ALEC's keynote speaker, and so they were also protesting her. So thanks to the Denver folks for protesting the corporatization of local government and state government, and also the corporatization of education. And they showed up with, they have these big puppets of all of the corporate Supreme Court justices. So they made a new one for Justice Gorsuch, and they used those props for their protest, and loved seeing the pictures, and got a lot of attention, got several media stories, and did some really great work. So yeah.
So is that posted up on the Facebook page? How do folks find them?
Folks can go to the Denver Move to Amend page, which Garrett could probably post here, and can see those pictures from that event on the Metro Denver Move to Amend page. And then also, I didn't put it in the notes here, but another one, congratulations to Sacramento Move to Amend for securing labor endorsement, a new endorsement, or an endorsement from a new union, United Auto Workers 5810, came on as an endorsing organization this month as well. So good work to folks in Sacramento for that.
I'll say, that is great work. And that's something we're doing too. I don't want to spend a lot of time because we need to move along, but the Labor Caucus is picking up and moving along, and is that part of the work of the Labor Caucus?
Yeah. Well, the Labor Caucus supports affiliates doing outreach to organized labor, and so we have all the materials. So the materials that were used to make the case to the UAW union is what were used, and so if others have any labor connections or want to just cold go into a central labor council, which is kind of the council of all the AFL-CIO unions in your area. Most like cities have central labor councils or regions. We have a whole set of materials that you can use to solicit support from organized labor. And one of the questions that we're often getting from our representatives when we go into the meetings is concern about how the amendment will impact unions, because unions are artificial entities too, or legal entities too, and so our amendment would make it so that unions do not have constitutional rights either, which is important to be kind of fair across the board. And that's an important talking point when talking to conservatives, because they're concerned that we're trying to like slip in some agenda that is going to unfairly support, labor over corporations, and that's not what we're trying to do. But at the same time, unions sometimes get worried that they will be at a disadvantage when actually they're at a disadvantage right now because they don't have the kind of money that corporations have, most corporations have, to spend in the political process. And so we have materials that helps explain why this amendment would not set unions back, and in fact would make it more level and fair, because what unions have that corporations don't have is membership that can actually do the work to move forward their agenda in politics or in legislation, and corporations can't at this point, and certainly when the amendment passes, make their employees, for example, show up at rallies and things like that. And so it would both be fair for, unions and nonprofits and corporations to all be affected equally, but also at the same time is not something that unions need to worry about. But that's a question that a lot of lawmakers have. And so the materials on our website help explain that. And it's really important for us to get labor support so that for all of the Democratic representatives, we can say, don't worry, you may be supported by unions, but unions support this amendment, which is, increasingly the case. It's just a matter of going to them and asking and helping explain. And so that's actually a big part of the work. And if anybody has connections with organized labor, it would be really valuable if you would ask them to officially endorse Move to Amend. And I hope that Garrett, this isn't in the notes because this is sort of something that's coming up off the cuff, but if Garrett, you can post the link to the Labor Caucus's materials, that would help for anybody who would like to use those.
So what's ahead? What's coming up in September besides our birthday?
Let's see. Hold on one second. I'm getting a message here. I think something might be going wrong. We suddenly just lost. I just want to make sure we're still here. Give me 1 second, Laura. Apologies if everything is fine, but we just lost our staff support out of this document. So I don't know if that's because their internet went down or something went wrong with us. Looks like everything's okay. So I'm going to keep going. Okay, so for September, well, first of all, Pledge to Amend is getting underway because basically Labor Day marks the beginning of campaign season, and obviously it's 2017, so it's an odd year, which means that we don't have federal elections for the most part. There's a couple exceptions, but for the most part, we don't have federal elections in odd years. But Pledge to Amend is our campaign to get candidates running for office to pledge to use their office to support the We the People Amendment, no matter what office they're running for. So we're not just talking about Congress members. We're not just talking about state legislators. We're talking about people running for city council or county commissioner. For a couple different reasons, we want to target these municipal places. Increasingly, corporations are spending money in local races too. So this is increasingly actually a locally relevant issue directly. But in addition to that, there's local resolutions that we're trying to get passed, and so we need to know that our local elected officials will support us in calling on Congress to pass the amendment. And people who run for city council are the ones who are probably most likely to be running for state legislature, in the years down the road, or Congress. Elected officials start generally at the municipal level, and if they like it and they're good at it, then they work their way up to higher office. And so getting folks, this is a long-term campaign, so getting folks as supporters, committed, understanding this issue right now at the beginning of their careers is going to be critical because, 5 years down the road, 6, 7 years down the road, they may be state legislators who we will need to ratify our amendment. And so good to get them right now. And so anybody running for office is fair game to participate in Pledge to Amend. And so Garrett will post the details for how you can target your candidates for office. They could be running for dog catcher. They could be running for water district. It doesn't matter. Lots of times there's a corporate connection at some point in their careers at the local level, and even if there isn't, if they want to be a leader in this country and represent the people, then they should be clear on what their opinion is of the idea that corporations have constitutional rights and money is speech, and they owe it to the public and the voters to be honest about what their opinion is. And so that's what you're asking them to do. By taking the pledge, they're saying that they support the amendment, but even if they don't, then that's information that voters should have as well. And then we also have a voter pledge, so that if you think that this is one of the most important issues, then you can actually commit and say, I'm not going to vote for anybody who doesn't support this amendment. And then you can tell your candidates that you won't vote for them unless they take a position. So that's Pledge to Amend, and that'll be getting started in September for this year. We've already done some work in the primaries, but in earnest, between September to November is election season, and so it's important that we get going on Pledge to Amend. And then, do you want to talk about Constitution Day? Because I've already people are hearing
Well,
my
yes,
voice a lot.
It's September 17th, and it's every year, and each year, educational institutions receive federal funding, and ones that receive federal funding must provide programming around the U.S. Constitution. So this provides us at Move to Amend with an opportunity to get into schools and make connections with educators, administrators, and students of all ages. So we really encourage you and our affiliates to reach out to their contacts in schools, as well as make new contacts with local schools, and offer to provide materials or present materials to students yourselves. Civics is a thing of the past, and this is a great opportunity to really talk to in the education system about democracy and the role of a citizen in democracy. So if you're not in a position, though, to help Move to Amend get into a school near you, another option would be for you to hold a house party with your friends, introduce them to Move to Amend. You could even show them our documentary, Legalize Democracy. And that's coming up September 17th.
Yep, so...
And to find out about that, Garrett will post on the page here a link you can follow to get all the information, get all the details and resources you need about hosting a house party. So we have that available too.
Yep, exactly. And then let's see. I guess the last thing that we just wanted to make sure everyone knows is that we're gearing up for a good bit of barnstorming in the fall. And barnstorming is our speaking tours that we do all over the country. Public events where we, kind of explain Move to Amend and get people involved. That's a lot of times the ways that we start local affiliate groups or just get people engaged in the community. So Laura will actually be doing some barnstorming speaking in Ohio in September. And Greg Coleridge, our outreach co-director, will be in Pennsylvania and Delaware in October. And I'll be in Arizona in November. And then I will also be in Oregon in December. So every month through the rest of the year, we'll be doing some barnstorming. And so if you live in any of those states, or if you know anybody who lives in those states, be checking our barnstorming page for specifics about which towns, on which dates. We'll also send emails like we always do. If you are not yet on our email list, you want to go to movetoamend.org/join to sign the motion to amend and get plugged in. And then into 2018, we'll be setting our schedule for a number of other states. I know we'll be going to Montana and Idaho in the spring, as soon as the weather is good enough to be able to do that. We'll be going to Texas probably like in late winter. And I feel like there's Florida as well. We're talking about doing late winter in 2018. So the details are still kind of coming together for all of that. But if you're interested in bringing Move to Amend to your state, then on the barnstorming page, there's also a link to the form where you can request that we visit your community. So let us know. And I think that's September, which is a lot. And I will mention